This is our house.
And now on the Chris Smith Show, Open House. On the job with Monarch. Faster, easier, with a smooth finish every time and no brush marks. Monarch Advanced Neo.
Good to have Monarch on board as the sponsor of our Open House segment every second week on the program. Thank you very much for that. Has the bubble burst? According to SQM research figures, the auction clearance rate last weekend in Sydney dropped to 53%. And many of those successful auctions only had one or two bidders participating. Peter O'Malley from Harris Partners joins me now. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Chris.
What's happened? Has the bubble burst? Is the frantic nature of the market from last year tapered off?
The bubble hasn't burst, but it's deflating, and that's probably how regulators want it, Chris. That's not to say that we won't see a spectacular event at some stage if interest rates were to rise rapidly, but at the moment we're just seeing the frenzy fade, the bubble deflate. I think prices are still very high. They're still probably overvalued, if I'm being fair and reasonable on that point, but they are coming off a bit.
So the number of bidders seems to have been reduced, according to the SQM research figures.
Every key indicator is coming off.
Right.
Auction clearance rates, internet activity, inquiry levels, people attending open houses, bidders per property, all the key indicators that
Except
a real estate agent...
supply, though, mate. If you get on some of the websites, I don't know what the figures are, but in terms of supply, if you get on Domain or realestate.com.au, there are houses for sale everywhere.
That's right, and that's feeding into the softness that we're seeing in the market, is buyers have a lot more choice out there, and vendors can't act bolshy during negotiations because they'll lose their best buyer.
So what do you think the philosophy is? What do you think the mentality is at the moment from those who are trying to buy? They've decided they don't want to be hit with an increase in interest rates later this year?
Well, from a home buyer's perspective, the mortgage rates have already changed on them. So the retail banks did increase interest rates late last year, and that changed the game at that point.
Right.
What masked that weakness, if you like, Chris, is that there were very low stock levels over the summer. But suddenly, as you've already pointed out, stock levels have surged, so there's less buyers in the marketplace competing for more listings, and that's what's showing up in the the dashboard of every campaign that we are marketing at the moment and most agents are dealing with.
Why have we got a larger supply?
I think it's just people are nervous about what's coming later in the year. So if you look at April, we've got Easter, school holidays, Anzac Day long weekend. You go to May, we've got the federal election.
Yeah.
After the federal election,
Winter.
New government potentially, interest rate rises. So I think a lot of vendors have looked at the year and said, I'm better off going sooner rather than later.
Sooner rather than later. That's probably the way it will go. What about the rental market at the moment, Peter?
Vacancy rates are really low, and that's the precursor to rents rising. So the story that landlords have been waiting for 2 years during COVID is finally happening. The rental market is recovering, so tenants need to be aware that they're probably going to be asked to pay more to stay in the existing property, or they're going to have to downgrade the property that they live in, because landlords will be looking for higher rents on the back end of the year.
And one of the reasons why that's the situation is because we've now got to think 120,000 students back into the country.
That's the primary reason, absolutely. The international borders being open, and we're starting to fill up population-wise again.
And what is the apartment market in terms of sales and auctions going the same direction as the housing market?
Apartments are still underperforming houses, Chris.
Right.
Very price sensitive. Even with houses now, it's price sensitive. So a vendor could have named their price in 2021. That is not the case now. And if you are selling an apartment, you're probably against a lot of seller competition. And if you price at the current market price, there'll be a buyer there for you. There won't be a bidding war. And if you overprice, no one will even turn up to look at your property.
So what can we expect from, say, the middle of autumn? Say, for instance, as you're talking about Easter, from Easter through until spring, we're likely to see a real tapering off in the real estate market.
The only thing that can save the market in the short term, in my view, is stock tightens really dramatically over the winter period, which is quite possible that that's what will happen. By the time we get to spring, the seasonal surge of stock will be there.
Yep.
You can expect an interest rate rise from the RBA, you would have to think. Who knows where the whole Ukraine thing will be, and that's hitting consumer sentiment as we're seeing. So spring is looking like it might be a bit of a buyer's market, I'd be prepared to say, this far out.
So maybe buyers need to hold off until spring and sellers need to hold off until spring too, because we're getting very, very close to the period where there are changes in what Australians are doing.
That's right. I think from a seller's perspective, you've got to look for pockets in the market where you can get a price that you're happy with. For example, who would have thought the property market would have boomed last year during lockdown? But that's exactly what happened. And there was a lot of vendors who wanted to sell their property that actually held back during lockdown because it was lockdown.
Yeah.
But that, in hindsight, was actually the right time to go to market.
Yeah.
So you need to be in tune with what's happening week to week.
Well, you help us with that every time you come into the studio, and you've helped us with that today. Thank you so much, mate, and all the very best. Busy day for you?
Very busy, yes.
Okay. Well, that's good. Good to see.
Indeed. Thanks,
From
Chris.
Harris Partners, Peter O'Malley with the latest. So it's deflating. Hasn't burst as yet, but it is deflating, and you should be aware of it if you're out and about looking for a home today.